the appointment of Justice Raymond Zondo as head of the Constitutional Court has been met with mixed reaction. The Economic Freedom Fighters has called the move factional, while the Judicial Service Commission has welcomed the decision, even though they had recommended the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Justice Mandisa Maya. I'm joined now by University of Cape Town's Associate Professor of Public Law, that's Richard Calland. Prof, good morning to you. Let's get your thoughts on this decision by the President, sidestepping a recommendation from the Judicial Service Commission.
Yes, good morning, Ollie. It's good to be on your show again. Look, it was a difficult decision for the President and made harder by the fact that he went for this rather elongated, overcomplicated process. I mean, after all this, he could have nominated Deputy Chief Justice Zondo last July. There could have been an interview with the JSC in, say, August, and a new Chief Justice could have been in place when the predecessor's term ended last October. Instead of which, he wanted the extra consultation. He had 4 very strong candidates, all of whom were interviewed by the JSC. The JSC was a disaster, as we know. It was an absolute shambles. It was hijacked by people with their own very particular, personal and vicious agendas. And at the end of that, I think it had clouded the picture. There was more heat than light. But I give a lot of credit to the President. Despite that, he's gone against the grain, if you like, by refusing to simply accept what the JSC came up with Mandisa Maya as their recommendation. That recommendation was merely a recommendation. The Constitution makes it clear it's for the President to decide, and he has opted, he's used his authority to, in a sense, appoint the obvious candidate. That's the current Deputy Chief Justice, a man who has served the country well.
Some analysis around this move, Professor Calland. One of the analysts we've spoken to this morning saying that the President effectively trying to dodge the political bullet here by appointing Zondo, while at the same time nominating Justice Maya for the position of Deputy Chief Justice, which now is vacant.
Well, one of the things that cropped up on Twitter yesterday, and I found myself engaged with, was the question of whether a Chief Justice since '94 has been brought in, helicoptered in, if you like, from outside of the Constitutional Court. And the answer to that question was no. All of the previous Chief Justices were already members of the Constitutional Court. So an appointment of either Mandisa Maya or indeed Dunstan Lambo would have been an exception to that custom, if you like. And I suppose there is a case for saying, well, why rush this when there were 2 candidates here already members of the court, accustomed to its practices, familiar with colleagues and the kind of intellectual challenges of the court. Why not appoint one of them and then, of course, do what the President has now done, which is, in a sense, groom the next Chief Justice by giving Justice Maya the opportunity to serve as Deputy Chief Justice in the next 2 years before Zondo retires.
What do you think counted against Justice Maya?
I don't think one should look at it that way. I think that here were 4 very good candidates. I think that, unfortunately, Maya's interview at the JSC was so badly put together, the JSC was so badly chaired, that her interview was not a good one because it didn't test her. It didn't give her an opportunity to show her intellectual capabilities, her leadership qualities. And so at the end of it, sadly, one was left wondering whether, in fact, she was as good as the others. If her interview had revealed that she was as good as, equal with the other 3, then I think the principle of positive discrimination should have applied, and the first woman Chief Justice should have been appointed at that point. But that didn't happen. And so therefore you've got a Deputy Chief Justice who has served the country extremely well. Of course, it's highly contentious to say that because those for whom the State Capture Commission has fingered, as it were, who have been named and have findings been made against them, don't like Zondo for obvious reasons. Why would they? But in fact, the Zondo Commission, despite its weaknesses in process and the fact it's taken too long, has nonetheless done a sterling job, in my view. It's producing an extraordinary record of what went wrong and why. Deputy Chief Justice Zondo deserves enormous credit for that. And it seems to me this is not about rewarding him for that, but it's about recognizing that here is a man of principle, of calm determination, of resolve, who is well equipped to lead and who should therefore be given that opportunity to serve as Chief Justice, albeit just for 2 years.
You decry the interview process, Professor, and it was indeed the overwhelming sentiment on the back of those interviews. I spoke this morning to Dalimpofu, who speaks for the JSC, and he used the words, "There is room for improvement" when it comes to the interview process at the JSC. Do you take those words from him?
Well, frankly, I can't afford not to have a wry smile when I hear you say that it's Dalimpofu who is offering those thoughts. The fact that he's even the spokesperson for the JSC is somewhat problematic. He, along with one or two others, were the crux of what went wrong in the JSC, raising highly inappropriate questions. I mean, his question to Mandisa Maya was scandalous. It was sexual discrimination in plain sight when he made that outrageous comment about having spent a night with her. As it turns out, it was an attempt at a very weak joke of having stayed up working late with her, studying. But that was appalling. And he's not fit to serve on that commission. He really isn't. He shouldn't be anywhere near that commission. And the commission now has to do some spring cleaning. And, of course, the task for leading that spring cleaning will now fall to the new Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo. And he will have that responsibility, I think. He'll do it in his usual way, carefully, but with quiet resolve. And I hope he takes that as a very important priority as he comes into this new role.
Professor Calland, lastly, we are likely to come back to the very process that you are speaking about, that interview of a Chief Justice, the next Chief Justice, because Justice Zondo, 2.5 years is all he has. The consultative element of this by President Ramaphosa, is that something that you would want to see happen again, that a number of candidates are put up and they are interviewed as we saw the last time? Or do you prefer reverting to the old system of one candidate and that candidate is interviewed and, I suppose, weighed in terms of suitability for the position?
Polly, it's a very good question. And I'm again smiling wryly because, of course, back in 2011, when Justice Mogoeng was nominated by President Zuma, many of us felt that it was a weak process because there was not the opportunity to set his nomination against other nominees, potentially. But, of course, that was because we thought that Mogoeng was not the best nominee, that there were other people, such as Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, who should have been put forward. This time, there were 4 candidates, all of whom were good, all of whom, if they'd been individually nominated on their own, would, I think, have attracted a lot of support. So, in 2.5 years' time, I think the President, whoever it is, must actually back a horse and say, look, I think X is the right person. The Constitution gives the President the power and authority to make that choice. Why not use it? And then, of course, the JSC gets its little moment to interview that candidate in front of the public, which is a useful thing. And then, of course, the President can decide whether to continue with the appointment process, armed with that interview and other consultations that he or she can undertake.
University of Cape Town's Associate Professor of Public Law, Richard Calland, thank you very much for your time.